With the leadership of Sultan Alparslan, the Seljuk Empire had opened the gates of Anatolia and stepped into the Roman lands. Weakening political power of the Muslims was recovering by the arrival of Turks. European Christians had gathered a huge army to stop the Turkish advance and descended on the Muslims. They had captured the eastern Mediterranean coast and Jerusalem and committed terrible atrocities on the Muslims. The Muslim heartland was bleeding and the political instability in the Seljuk Empire was intensifying. Influential Seljuk commanders had frustrated of the turmoil and they had begun establishing their independent domains called beyliks. One of these beyliks was established in the city of Mosul by Imad Zengi, who was a member of the Ashur tribe of Oghuz Turks. Unavoidably, the fragmentation of the region by the beyliks caused a struggle for supremacy between one another, and this was making it impossible to fight effectively against the Crusaders. Imad Zengi knew that unless the Muslims are united under one banner, it was inconceivable to triumph over the Crusaders. Therefore, he first intended to expand his influence on the region prior to marching on the Crusaders. He adopted a policy of subjugation of the Turkish and Arabian rulers of Diyarbakir and Syria. Mobilizing to achieve his goals, he captured Sinjar, Nusaybin and Harran, followed by the city of Aleppo in 1128. This had put an end to the Crusader aspirations on Aleppo. Zengi's next target was the city of Damascus, but before that he had to capture Hama and Homs. He captured Hama on 1130. However, he was not able to make any significant progress in Homs and went back to Mosul. He then confronted the Artukids in a battle and defeated them, capturing the city of Diyarbakir. Following this victory, he turned his attention back to Damascus and captured it. Now he had a grip on most of the region. Now it was the time for the Crusaders. Firstly, he besieged the Crusader castle of Esarib. Although the king of Jerusalem attempted to break the siege, Zengi was able to defeat him and capture the castle at the same time. After this success, with the full support of the Muslims, Zengi's next target was the county of Edessa. The city of Edessa was the first place the Crusaders had settled 40 years ago. The French Crusaders had been invited by the local Armenians into Edessa during the First Crusade and established the county. The county of Edessa was located at a crucial crossroad in the region and it was dividing the Muslim region in two. It was besieged by many times by the Muslims, but none of these attempts had been successful. After years of great effort to consolidate his power, Atabeg of Mosul of the Seljuk Empire, Imad Zengi was famed among the Muslims as a hero who would initiate a jihad against the Crusaders. After suppressing the remaining threats, now it was the time to besiege the city of Edessa. In accordance with the Islamic tradition, Imad Zengi firstly demanded the surrender of the city without any bloodshed. But the county of Edessa refused it because they were expecting the Principality of Antioch and the Kingdom of Jerusalem to save them. Upon the refusal of the surrender offer, Imad Zengi besieged the city. The city had been besieged by the Turks many times in 40 years, but all had failed. However, the Zengi took all the necessary precautions and made his preparations very well. The Turkish mangonels were beating the city walls while the archers were giving the defenders a tough time. Meanwhile, the Turkish sappers were digging a tunnel towards the weakest point of the northern wall. Count of Edessa, Jocelyn II, was not in the city at that time. Although he asked for an immediate help from the Principality of Antioch and the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the doors were shut to his face. The Archbishop Hugh in the city would be in command of the defense, and Jocelyn II would only be able to watch his capital city falling into Turkish hands. The tunnels were getting deeper and wider below the weaker section of the northern wall. Zengid sappers planted explosives below the wall after completing the tunnel. He sent a final offer of surrender. However, the defenders did not only refuse the offer but also ridiculed and insulted the Zengids, because they thought that the Count would be arriving soon to relieve the city. Imad ad-Din Zengi did not have many choices. The defenders were not appreciating his mercy. In response, Imad ad-Din Zengi ordered the criers to announce the army that he allows the plundering and sacking of the city for 3 days. On the 24th of December 1144, the cord of the explosives below the wall was set alight. The Turks were watching the northern wall impatiently. With a huge explosion, the wall blew up, raising smokes and flames. The Turks poured into the city from the breach. The defenders lost their ground in a short amount of time. As the Turkish forces were quickly advancing in the city, Armenian and Assyrian residents were running away from them. When the dust settled, the Turks were bewildered on the scene in front of them. On the order of the Latin Archbishop Hugh, the Crusaders had closed the gates to the keep, leaving the Armenians outside at the mercy of the Turkish forces. The scene was horrible. Due to the panic, thousands of Armenian women and children were pounding the gates to the inner castle and crushing each other in the stampede. After entering the city and arriving at the terrible scene with his personal guards, Imad ad-Din Zengi immediately ordered his troops to halt the attack. According to the Muslims, the city of Edessa had been the home city of many old prophets, and Zengi did not want to see the city burned down and razed. Despite the fact that he had told his troops to pillage the city after the main assault, now he told them to release the prisoners and return the confiscated possessions back to Armenian people in the city. After completely capturing the city, Zengi ordered the execution of that 100 crusaders who had closed themselves in the keep and left the Armenian and Assyrian people crushing each other at the gate. The commander who would control the city in the name of Zengi asked the Armenian bishops to swear an oath that they will not betray the Turks anymore, and said to them, "You are aware that you have deserved to die by opposing us and by insulting our prophet. However, despite this, we will not harm you and release the prisoners. You know that Edessa was thriving and prosperous when it was under Muslim control. The Crusader occupation for 50 years have turned it into a slum. Our master Imad ad-Din will treat you well. Live in peace and pray for his help." After the conquest, the locals were allowed to practice their religion freely, and their churches were allocated back to them. Only the churches that belonged to the Latin Crusaders were confiscated, and the biggest one was converted into an administrative palace. The conquest of Edessa was welcomed cheerfully in the Islamic realm, while the Christians were dazed by the news. Upon seeing that the Crusader states are in a perilous situation, the Pope called for another crusade.